Okay. Got it. Welcome back to the things we know. I think by now our listeners know our voices, but in case you're new, I'm Kari Moore.
And I'm Lisa Callahan. And today we are finally going to talk about something that you and I have been mulling over. We keep pushing it back. Things keep coming up, new information that we wanted to include. But we've been wanting to talk about this for a long time, which is so near and dear to our heart. Gen X men. There's a lot of funny, poignant things about them. And us as Gen X women. I mean, we talk about being Gen X women all the time. But again, we just have a lot of noticings around this. This isn't fact-based necessarily, but we live with Gen X men and we know so many of them from growing up. You and I are both lucky to have long friends that we've had for years, like since high school. So we have Gen X men friends. And then of course we work with them and in our social lives.
And we sleep next to them, all of it. And just like you always say, like when you get a car, you see that car everywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's something I think you and I have talked about since we've met. And since I started coaching, I've been like, I'm noticing this about men, especially. But once we started talking about this topic, it has come up everywhere without me even asking, like on a flight. Like we've both traveled a lot lately. I was in Chicago right after you. You were seeing some of your Gen X men friends. I ran into one from high school. He brings it up, right? Like, he doesn't bring up, like, let me talk about being a Gen X man. He was talking about just what's going on with he and his peers and what are the struggles and what are the things. So, partly it could be we are in midlife and these things come up.
Yeah.
And so I just keep trying to string together what's unique about this group, right?
Which is why we keep putting it off, because it's like we go to record it and then you're like, hold up, I got some new information.
I know.
And so, divine right timing as always.
Right. So it's like, I think this is just going to be an ongoing conversation. Sometimes it's funny because we've been like, not this week.
Totally.
But I mean, really, truly, I think we'll be back for some interesting takes on this and just Gen X's in general, because it is funny. You're seeing it all in social media too.
Totally. Yeah. So let's be clear about what we mean when we say Gen X. So Generation X. You said it was first shown in a book in the 80s.
1991 novel, Generation X, Tales for an Accelerated Culture by Douglas Copeland.
Okay. Which that name sounds familiar. And I said Billy Idol's band, his punk rock band, was actually Generation X. So this is it. It's culled from that time period. It's a demographic cohort that typically includes individuals born between the early 60s and early 80s. So you and I are both 69. So we're kind of smack dab. I felt like Gen X was a little closer to the end of the 60s. Is that not?
Me too, because my brother, I feel like he's the tail of baby boomers and he's 5 years older than me. So
67 was the beginning. That's where I feel like I've always seen.
Yeah, he was born in 63 and I was pretty sure he was the tail end of the boomers, and my sister's the very beginning of Gen X at 67. I'm sorry, my brother and sister, they're going to hate me. I just gave away your birthdays.
Oops, sorry. Yeah.
They look younger than me, actually.
You all look gorgeous. We've seen pictures. Yes, for sure. So that makes sense. I feel like 66, 67 was the beginning of Gen X, going through the early 80s. And it comes after the baby boomers and before the millennials. I do think there are Gen X parents who have millennial kids, but you and I both have Gen Z, which I love. I don't know why. I just love being a Gen X mom with a Gen Z kid. I don't know why I love that so much.
That's awesome. Does that make millennials Gen Y?
No, it just makes them millennials. I mean, I think it's interesting that that's become another generation name, a Gen Z. Like but it rolls off the tongue so nicely.
Interesting. Yeah. And and we were saying earlier before, like it makes us like the middle children. I wasn't as aware as people, for those of us on social media, I'm not even on it as much, but one of the greatest things about being on it is classmates, right? Yeah. People from your past who are around your age. So when they're posting things, you notice it and it cracks you up. And I didn't notice until COVID that it seems common knowledge among our peers that we are the forgotten generation, that when generations are being listed, they completely leave us out sometimes. Like that is such a joke. And it makes sense because we were the latchkey kids who kind of were on our own, and everyone was bragging during COVID that like we were fine with quarantine because it was just like letting ourselves in the house and making nachos.
Totally.
Watching MTV. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, boomers have always had such an outsized persona. You know, they're the biggest generation. They came out of, you know, World War II and so forth. So I get that. And then all of a sudden, millennials, they just popped up, and there's so much stigma around them that us little Gen Xers just kind of kept going along. We're just doing our stuff.
Yeah.
As we always have.
And we'll probably get into that, but that's like, we have the work ethic and the, we walked to school in the snow sort of thing, version of it, like as Gen Xers, like, you know, just, you know, work hard and shut up. But we'll get to that. But let's celebrate first. Awesome. What makes Gen X so cool? It's including these men. What's unique for them? And I want to start just with celebrating what's rad about Gen Xers. Do you like what I did there? It's rad.
I love it.
So here's some characteristics that I think are out there defining Gen Xers. And again, everything we're going to say today is not based. We are not sociologists, and we haven't done studies. We might refer to, like, I think I will refer to a Psychology Today article at some point, but like, this is just our conversation around this and the things we relate to. So key characteristics that define some features of Generation X women, men and women, but you know, the technological transition is one. The Gen X men grew up during a period of significant technological age. We just realized we are the first generation to ever have a computer in a school. Right?
Yeah. It was rare, but yes.
Yes. And so probably millennials too, right? They might feel like the first, but like at the same time, right? But they were in primary school, we were in college. Like I remember people having those little boxy Mac, little Macs.
Yep.
They experienced the transition from analog to digital, the rise of personal computers in the early days of the internet. So a lot of entrepreneurs and tech boomers, like in this generation. So that's a celebration. That's like, some of it, like they had nothing to do with it, happened, but also, you know, like it was.
But we adapted.
Adaptability. Yeah, exactly.
Totally. I mean, when you really think about how much we have seen from, I think about, we didn't have an email address until we moved to Chicago in 97. Darren didn't buy a phone until I was pregnant with Liam. Like we just, you know, so it is that.
You mean a cell phone?
A cell phone. Yes. Yeah. He was doing Morse code. He was sending me Morse code.
He was going down to the receptionist in the building and asking her to hook
plug up in like Lily Tomlin.
Well, be confusing her. Yeah.
And so I mean, I think the adaptability is amazing for Gen X in general.
I like I love making my kids laugh when I tell them, like, when 94 we first got, I think, email, and we would go to connect to the internet, like start that process, do some dishes, maybe even take a shower.
Yep. Good old AOL.
Until it took forever to connect. Anyway. So.
Yep. I love it. It cracks me up when somebody still has their AOL email. I love it so much. It's so funny.
That's so old school.
It's so old school. You know, this is I love this next one because it feels so true to me. Skepticism and independence.
That is you. That could be your subtitle.
Totally. Gen Xers, again, we had to be, you know, we grew up with probably the first set of moms that really did work out of the house. You know, for me, my mom, when I was little, was around, but my parents got divorced when I was in the 7th grade and she started working, you know, so I didn't actually have a little key on a chain, but I definitely, you know, my sister and I stayed at home a lot by ourselves, and she was also dating. And so, you know, she'd come home and then she'd turn around and go out on a date. And, you know, my sister would tell you that she feels like she sort of raised herself, which she's not wrong. When she pointed that out to me, it was kind of mind blowing, but we're 4 years apart. And when I turned 18, I moved in with my dad. So my sister was 14. My mom was out dating and she was working. And Yeah, Amy pretty much literally raised herself as a teenager, which is crazy. But that does lend to questioning authority, I think, in a good way, and being self-reliant, which I think you and I, at least, I can't speak for every Gen X parent, but we've passed that down to our kids, which I think is a benefit for sure.
Yeah, I think the skepticism, like kind of made us like shitty teenagers to our parents' generation, but
Sure.
definitely like questioning authority. It's not that previous generations didn't; they totally did, but I think there was a way we were doing it. Maybe that was a little disrespectful in my parents' eyes. I don't know.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's work ethic. Many Generation X men entered the workforce during a time of economic uncertainty. Like the 90s were awful
90s.
for some people. Yeah. And corporate restructuring, and they put their heads down. And a lot of them, I think a lot of their parents were like with companies their entire lives. And so they started to, work hard and then kind of Frogger jump, the way. There's another good reference there. But I think they're seen as hardworking and adaptable and willing to change careers and jobs as necessary. So they don't feel like, some company takes everything away from them. So I think that that's another really wonderful thing to celebrate.
It is. And I also think it's still one of those things that feels a little, I want to say weird, right? Because again, we did grow up with parents, for a lot of us, I didn't, but with parents who worked in industries, dads that worked in industries that they could retire from with a pension and all that stuff.
My dad with Continental Airlines.
Yeah, yes. Your dad did. My dad definitely did not. My dad was a salesman and everything that comes with that. But I remember like my brother-in-law was working for a company, and Darren and I were both like, he was kind of a last bastion where he worked for a company for years. And we were always like, wow, like that just doesn't happen anymore. He did ultimately change jobs and has an amazing one now, but I think there's still that weirdness of like, oh, you jumped. Are we getting Gen X men? We were waiting for the timing of the Gen X kiss. Sorry for those of you listening. I guess maybe we'll edit that out because that won't make any sense. But on YouTube, you get to see it. Yeah, I think it's still a little odd to think, oh, we've changed jobs so many times over the course of our career because we're the first generation to do that. And now I think our kids see it as more normal. But I do think there's some stress around changing jobs as much as we did in Gen X. It was necessary and we were adaptable, and that's great. But it was kind of frowned upon, especially when we were younger, I think, personally.
Yeah, totally. And my dad would always say, like, don't be looking for a new job without a job. Like, like don't quit before you look for a new job. And, yeah. And also there was something about, which probably still, that we're always telling our kids, like staying somewhere, going back somewhere, getting rehired, that looks good on a resume. And I don't even know if that's true anymore. I just want to assume it's true that like going in person and applying, like those things that my dad passed down to us, like, I'm not sure. I hope that's still true.
I don't know that it
but
even
I think
exists.
There's like Gen X employers that still look for some of that too. Maybe they're the dinosaurs though. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway.
So entrepreneurial spirit, you and I both have that. Gen Xers are sort of called the entrepreneurial generation because so many of us have started our own businesses, embracing innovation, taking risks. I mean, just to start your own business is taking a risk. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, but I'm loving it. So I'm glad that was something that was normalized with Gen X.
Yeah, I think it's cool, the amount of people who started businesses. I didn't know a lot of people when I was young whose parents had started businesses, and my kids, like, that's almost all they know. That's so cool to them. Yeah. Cultural influences. Again, this is Gen X men and women, but like we grew up during a time of massive cultural change. If you've never watched the docuseries The Dark Side of the 90s, it's really cool and interesting. Because like that was, well, I mean, the 80s too, the emergence of punk rock and hip hop and all that, but then 90s grunge music scene and like MTV reality stuff, the video games genre, the blockbuster, all of that like that's so iconic now. At the time, I didn't see anything about it that was that exciting. And now it's just such a, the 80s and 90s and this generation, what we grew up with, I think, maybe did lead to some of that entrepreneurial stuff that maybe did kind of, inspire the creative juices. But that's definitely an influence and something, I don't know why. I just put it here to say that's one of the things I think stands out.
Oh, I agree. I mean, again, I feel like there's so much if you think 67 to early 80s, and so then we're in our teen years, our really influential years while all of this is happening. Grunge was such a big influence. My husband was in a band that was very 80s at the time, very reminiscent of Roxy Music and ABC, and it was getting some good traction. And then grunge happened, and it could not have been more different. And right. So it really changed a lot. And you and I we are so in love with all that cultural stuff that, definitely impacts us. Yeah. I think, parenting is fascinating with Gen X men. A lot of, obviously there's Gen X parents. There's also now Gen X grandparents. And Gen X parenting for men and women, I think, shifted, right? Again, women are working more often and putting kids in daycare. So maybe the moms aren't as hands-on as our moms were, and the dads were more hands-on. Yeah. I did see something very recently about somebody who talked about how their husband said they would babysit the kids. You don't babysit your own kids, but she pointed that out. I'm sure she pointed it out to her husband too.
I love it. Yeah, Gen X men are really good. Like, how can I help? What do you mean help? You're the co-founder here.
Co-founder.
You decide. Yeah. And then there's like the midlife transition, because Gen X men like us are currently navigating midlife, right? Which brings up a lot of stuff. And we're finding that, and we talk here a lot about what women are going through right now, this identity stuff. I wonder, like, in talking to men, I don't know that they have as much of an identity thing happening, other than, they're so fixed in what they do is who they are, right? Versus like, they're not as comfortable in the world of like just who they are without what they do. Yeah. But I think navigating midlife and is really, like reflections on career, relationships, and identity for people who actually have the space and time and maybe good fortune to sit and wonder about those things, because some are like so busy. I think there's a lot coming up for them right now. And that's what's starting a lot of these conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And what I'm always curious about, the thing that when we've been talking about this, the thing that always comes to my mind is just this place that the Gen X men are, of having boomer dads who had a pension, who worked, for the same company their entire life, came home, wife fixed the dinner, wife put away all the food, cleaned the kitchen, he just sat there. And then the Gen X dads who have jumped jobs, have become entrepreneurs, have been more hands-on. And so in a way, it reminds me of like what my sister said about raising herself, and Gen X men can't really reflect on doing what their dad did because they're not like their dad. So it's this weird, I feel like it could be a really weird, nebulous place for them when it comes to all of this. Oh, and and how are they handling it? Who are they talking to? Are they talking to anybody? Right. Are they just putting their head down and forging on? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's what's come up a lot, if we want to go into like the struggles, right? Like, here's what's coming up a lot is emotions, right? So like so we talked, I mean, this kind of cuts into a lot of things we just focused on: parenting, relationships, identity, all of that stuff. One thing I think, and I told you I was talking to a friend of mine who is kind of like on the cusp of Gen X and millennials. And she's like, I'll never date a Gen X man again. Like, she's very negative on them. Whereas you and I, for obvious reasons, we love them. Yeah. And I think like we can see that there's room for a lot of both. And in fact, I think I pulled up like earlier this year, January, Psychology Today came out with an article, why so many men feel lonely today. So, and it was about men and loneliness. That 1 in 3 men, report feeling very lonely. And I think I was saying, like, it said, beneath this facade, there's a deeply, this facade being, what I do. Like they worked so hard and they kind of plugged into the things they thought were important that they did differently than their fathers. And, and they've created some success and they're lonely. They don't actually have the connections. Look at your sad face.
I know, I'm sorry.
So like there's, but beneath the facade, there's a deeply felt lack of permission to be authentic and to show complex inner world in which they live. The lack of permission, from whom is what you and I would ask as coaches, can become so internalized that men shut off their emotions altogether, hiding them from others and even from themselves. And that emotional expression can become so foreign that men actively avoid it in other people as well, right? So like we grew up with those messages of like, don't be emotional. Just witnessing the emotions of other men becomes uncomfortable. They may self-distance as a form of self-protection, yet this only perpetuates isolation and loneliness. We saw this also reflected in the Kens, in the Barbie movie, right? It reminds me of what Brene Brown was saying, like, we've got it wrong for so long. We bought this, and I know so many Gen X men I've talked to agree with this, that you're supposed to like rely on your brain. We are thinking beings and emotions just get in the way. Right. So like even in my husband's training as a surgeon, my dad's training as a pilot, like you don't get emotional, you stay really cool. You're taught to admire the people who stay really calm in a crisis, which, thank God. That's nothing wrong with that, except for if it teaches you that emotions are unprofessional or messy or get in the way, how are you ever going to connect with other humans? How are you ever going to know who you are? Right. It's no wonder they're connected to like what they do and not who they be. Right. And so what came up for me, like with my husband, I don't think he'd mind me sharing this. And also so many people I've talked to is men are transactional. Right. So when, realizing and reflecting when our son moved away, he's like, God, like a lot of his first year, he was realizing, oh, whenever I talk to him, it's about, don't forget to pay this bill. Don't forget this. Don't forget this. So when he went to visit him at the beginning of his sophomore year, I was like, we've raised him. He's out. It doesn't mean like he's completely, like that frontal lobe hasn't completely formed and we haven't like he's not totally on his own yet. We're still supporting him in his education, but could you imagine visiting him and just like being you and my son made like the most beautiful analogy or comparison. He said, Dad always said he was so sad that his dad died at 20 because he never had that chance to like just be a guy with him and hear his stories. He was so looking forward to that. His older brother had that, but his dad passed away when he was 20. He's like, I'm 20 at the time. It's 2 years ago. My dad isn't gone, but I like haven't had that chance yet either. And, and I shared that and with Brendan, he was so grateful because instead of maybe not going because he should get back after his work trip. And I was like, no, you should go. And instead of going and being like, what should we do? Should we run some errands for you or show me your, like, he just took him out to hear music and they had the best time. And he realized his reflection on that was, I think in my mind to provide and like be a dad, I just forgot to, like actually just be present.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge, undertaking for him. That's what he's doing in his 50s is learning how to be present, learning how to feel his feelings and express them and not stuff them down because he always thought that they got in the way. So, that's not like, these are the conversations that I keep having and that guys are just like, all of our conversations tend to be about, the surface stuff. And it's very rare, but it's happening where they're like, hey, can we get together and find out how we're really doing? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. You and I both watched in the first season of Welcome to Wrexham, the episode where they had I think she was a psychiatrist on, and she was talking about how every man she talked to during COVID, the thing they were missing the most was sports. And the reason they missed sports was because that's how they connected with their dad. And I just remember literally stopping and texting you and being like, oh my God, that makes so much sense to me. Darren's interesting because he lost his dad when he was in the 6th grade. So he also doesn't really have a model to go up against in terms of parenting. And he's really done a fantastic job. Again, I don't think Darren will mind me saying this because it's a running joke. Somebody pointed out that Darren and I are very much like WandaVision. And if you didn't watch WandaVision, Wanda was a witch.
Yeah.
And Vision was a robot. And when the person said that to me, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly right. Not only because I love being called a witch, that makes me super happy, but I texted it to Darren. He wasn't with me. And he was like, yep, that tracks. And it's not that Darren is and actually, we actually had a recent conversation about this. If you watched WandaVision or if you've seen Vision in any of the Marvel movies, yes, he's a robot, but he's actually really lovely and caring. And it's just not an outward, like crying, type, that kind of emotion, And
he's dear. He's very dear.
Dear is a perfect word. And that is totally Darren, And so when I think about Liam, when Liam comes home now, and Liam has pointed this out too. Liam has said to me, God, when I come home, I feel like Dad is really happy to see me. And I think he is, because now Dad's in only with women. So he has the opposite of you. But also he reverts back to being like the dad he was when Liam was little, which is really funny because he like tries to climb all over Liam and Liam's taller than him. And Liam looks at me and is like, oh my God, can you stop? Please help me. And so I think it's interesting because I think Darren's relationship with Liam is like a roller coaster. Not that there's ever down times, but whereas I feel like my relationship with Liam has just progressed along timeline, whereas Darren's is sort of, I don't know, I can't explain it, but it's very sweet. It is very sweet and cute. And I do like it when they get to do things together, if Liam comes home and they go see a movie together or they go do something.
Yeah.
I'm not involved. I think it's a nice time for them to bond for sure as two adult men. And it gives Liam an opportunity that Darren never had, which is to see how to be a dad as he gets older, Yeah,
I think that they're very present as fathers, these two, and so many of them. I mean, like, first of all, I know, like, I have a lot of guys this age in my life, like some who live really close to me or married to friends of mine, and they are very self-aware and they don't really fall into a lot of these stereotypes. They've been really, for whatever reasons, because of life and loss and struggles, they kind of got an early jump on self-awareness in that journey. But yeah, I think the parenting is where some of this is coming up, right? So yeah, I see that because it's like, oh wow, what is the relationship I want with my kids when they leave? And it is really hard to have a relationship with someone who's emotionally distant when you don't live near each other. Like, it's just really, really hard. So I think, we've said this before too, and Krista, Dr. Krista Anderson Ross, confirmed this. Like, there is something hormonally that happens too. I remember it with my dad, like, who was like a Marine tough guy, turned into this sappy. I mean, he was always loving, but like in terms of tearing up when he was just happy to have us all together, even my mom would just crack up. And like that does start to happen. And men are, and maybe they are spilling out because they didn't really learn how to just express them and manage them. Who knows? But I do think that it's happening at the exact right time. Like, it's still not too late, right? It's never too late, actually, to work on your presence. So it's this opportunity to be more self-aware or aware of emotions. Now, when I talk to my friend who's like, well, I will never date Gen X men again, they're like, some of the things she said were like, they are super entitled and what did she say? Entitled and lonely, I think is what she said. Like, they feel misunderstood, right? And when you date them, they expect you to fit into their lives and this like whatever life they've created, they want you to fit into that. And also, if they can't relate to it, it must not exist. So I want to voice that because that isn't my experience, but I have known her a long time, and she is this has been her experience over and over. So she dates younger. She's like, Gen X men have made me a cougar. Now I will only date millennials. But I think it's about like I talked to my friend's husband who I really didn't think they were going to stay married. This was years ago, and I did not think they were going to stay married. And he was like, yeah, if I don't know how she stayed married to me, but if I didn't go down the path of like introspection and, I was going to lose my wife and my kids, if I hadn't really looked at all the things that I was hiding behind, robotically, because I didn't know how to express things, I was going to lose everybody. So I definitely think it is a thing and there's a choice.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And I'm feeling as you're saying all this, like if there's an invitation at the end of this episode, it's like, do the work, and I don't mean it in a like do the work, but like it's there for you to choose to go inwards and see how you would like to be experiencing life differently, right? Like that's right. Our coaching sentence is, what would you like to be experiencing differently? If you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling like you don't know how to navigate, and again, this is for Gen X women as much as men, because I think this is about men, but the thing about Gen X women is we're also navigating uncharted territories, being entrepreneurs, working out of the home, managing being a stay-at-home mom and a working mom. You and I both did both, right? Like I worked and was a stay-at-home mom at the same time. Yes. I just happened to work when the kids were at school, and so it's, and we're navigating all of this stuff too. And if what you keep saying to yourself is this can't be all there is, something's got to change, you have the ability to choose to make some changes. Will it be easy? Absolutely fucking not. But it's there for you to grab if you so choose.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think the female version, whether it's Gen X or not, the female version of what we were describing and what we see among some women at our stage of life, our age and even a little younger, is, I just saw this at back to school night because my youngest is still in high school, right? Is ask a woman how she's doing and she tells you about her kids, nothing about her. Like she just says, oh, Charlotte's in a play and Miles is playing piano, right? Like that kind of thing. So I think like the female version of that is like we get stuck in our roles. It's super normal when you're working hard and trying your best, and like, and it could be like like an invitation to, I just didn't even include myself in that whole answer, or
right.
I don't hear from my kids, right? Like whatever those things are an invitation to, step out of it, become more aware. I don't know. I was thinking about that movie Calendar Girls. I think I was telling you about that I heard, and there was a movie, but there's a documentary on these women who are older than us, retired people in, I think it was in Florida, and they were like in their 60s and they formed a drill team. And they became so popular, and it became this sisterhood, and like this, like people just loved it, and they were traveling and performing. But the documentary really focused on how abandoned the men felt. Like they were looking forward to retirement and getting their wives' full attention, and they were suddenly making their own dinner, and they didn't have a thing for themselves. And it really exposed that. And then a lot of those women were like, I don't fucking care, right? Or like, get your own dinner. And I see that as like, that's where those things can go if you're not suddenly aware that like, I need something more than this. And could you support me? And what could you go do for you? What else do you have going? And so that's what I'm really psyched about, that like Brendan and friends of ours are doing. They're creating their own things. They're noticing that the women have time like that together, and the men are.
I'm laughing because we have both had this experience where Darren's asked me if you're my girlfriend.
Yeah. That's right. And then I called us a we. Kari. I called us a we. Oh, you're my we. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think Darren and Brendan are handling this fine, but it is funny because, in a quote unquote joking manner, Darren's like, you go do all the fun things with Kari. Are you dating Kari? I'm like, I mean, kinda, yeah.
You and Darren do so many fun things.
I know,
oh
we do
my
a lot of fun things.
gosh. You do.
And I think that there's where Darren and I's, where we have benefited is that we do a lot of great things together. But we have
you still date. It's so great.
We do. I mean, I don't think of it as dating, but yes, we definitely go out, and as we get closer to being empty nesters, and Charlotte is so busy, we have a lot of opportunity to spend time alone, and we don't just go to our separate corners. We go do things together. But we have done a lot of separate corners over the last 35 years. He is not somebody that likes to go work out. I do. I don't like horror films. He does. Like, he went the other night to an opening night of a horror film and took Charlotte. Now, I happen to be sick, so that was part of the reason. But I said to him when he got home, I was like, Charlotte's a better wingman for you there anyways, because she understands horror and she likes horror. And like, I'd just be like, oh, who's that? And so I think we've benefited in that we've always had our own paths and come together.
Yeah.
You and Brennan are like that too.
Well, but I mean, by nature of our work, yeah. I was raised by a pilot and a pilot's wife, so I actually love the solo time. I love the time together. Yeah, I think it was very different experiences when my dad was gone and then when he was home. Same here. I think. Well, I don't know if it's that different for my kids, but obviously we have our patterns without Brendan, and then when he's around, we always make sure we're having family dinner. We do it without him too, but yeah, I agree. I think he and I have our very different interests for sure. And we've always said that, like, what if you want to go do this and I want to go do that? And he's like, then we'll let each other do it. Yeah. So, you were going to talk about the patriarchy too. And I think that's a big piece here.
I mean, we bring it up a lot, but I do think that to me, that again is also one of the things they're bumping up against, because they're understanding that the patriarchy isn't working for them either, right? Like, for the boomer dads, it was just how it was, and the Mad Men era was exactly how it was supposed to be. And
all the gender normative stuff was just assumed. Everybody agreed with it, right?
Yep. We all fell in line, and I mean, I'm sure there were women that didn't, but what we saw on the face of everything was very Norman Rockwell. And Gen X men grow up, and maybe their moms are working out of the house a little bit, I mean, Darren's mom had to because his dad died. So his mom went out and she traveled the world and had great jobs and all that kind of stuff. And then they grow up with a Gen X woman who's like, I'm paving my own way. And there, again, this patriarchy, it's like, but my dad did it this way. And it feels like, again, nebulous to them. And it's just, it feels like they know they need to fight against it as well, but they're not as angry about it as we are. Like, we kind of get all fired up and they kind of follow us in that footstep. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
I mean, I was trying to think of what would, just in my mind, I was just trying to amuse myself, what would be their version of the America, how do you say her last name?
Ferrara. I think it's just Ferrara.
Ferrara.
You're right, American Ferrara. Yes.
What would be their version of this speech? Because I was just thinking, like, be the breadwinner, be tough, be strong, like, grit your teeth, don't cry. But
definitely take care of the kids.
Yes, but be a good dad. You got to be more involved. And then I was thinking too, like, don't be emotionally distant, but
also don't.
But cry. She likes a sexy bad boy, so
right.
So like, what are the mixed messages there that kind of messed them up that they followed? So like, we weren't even groomed to find that attractive. They do that in television and in movies. They always, if in a triangle, they always like get you to just fall for the bad guy, the guy on the motorcycle kind of thing. So it's funny.
And then I know, it's again, I don't, Darren would not mind me saying this. I mean, Darren was the bad boy that then turned into the good guy and the good dad. I mean, he was in a band and he had lots of girlfriends pre and post me, and I'm still here. So I mean, like, Darren definitely had that rep for sure. I don't think I think I always saw beyond that for him. And so that's why I did stick around as long as I did. But so I guess I had the benefit of both, in that he was the bad guy, but I could also see where he could be the good guy, And again, I have a lot of friends who are, artists, and there's that patriarchal fine line too, right? Of like, yes, you got to be the breadwinner, but I want to do this, and my soul is filled up this way, and I think creatives in and of themselves have a different struggle. Gen X creatives have a different struggle with that as well.
I do think like so many Gen X men are so loyal and dedicated. And when I think of that too, I think of the Gen X gay men that I'm really close to, and you probably can too. Like they're definitely a more, I don't mean politically conservative at all, but like they are in long-term relationships, and they're like really trying to make them work. Yes. And so I think like the reason I have a big heart for this, and when I started coaching, I realized as I was coaching women, their husbands sometimes were like, can I get in on that? But she seems like she feels great. I'd like to feel good too, like that kind of thing. And so I think the message keeps being here listening to us. It's like, like let go of what you do as your identity and start enjoying just who you are and the life you've created, which is not that different than what we do with women. I just think Gen X men are a little behind on that. They've been a little busy.
Feel like they have the permission, like you started with, and says who, I bet you if you asked your wife if you could do some personal growth, she'd be like,
oh my God, thank God.
For the love of God. How do I rightly send Kari and tell him thank you?
It's true.
You could get on our mailing list. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah.
How do you like that for a little inner plug there?
I love that. And again, these are generalizations. I think we're seeing and hearing so much of this. We'll continue to bring this here because it just keeps finding us, because it's in every conversation. So yeah, I think.
I mean, we've said it a million times, and we are Gen X women, so we'll say it a million more. We may be a little farther ahead on the journey to self-actualization, but there is still the paradigm, and there's plenty of women that are stuck in it just like men, and there are plenty of men that are doing the work and trying to squeeze out of it. So goddess bless all of you.
So this really is a celebration. We thought it was going to be a roast, but
it really wasn't. I know. I think that's really funny. We thought we were going to come in, but we love our Gen X men.
We do.
We do. I mean,
all y'all.
Great. All y'all. Yeah. We Gen X really is every meme you see it is. We really are exactly that.
Some of the funniest men I've ever met.
Oh my God. And I'll tell you what though, world, Gen X women with no fucks left to give. Watch out. Buckle up.
Hold your feet. All right. Should we do our song?
Yes. I don't know what hold your feet mean, but okay.
I said hold your seat, not hold your feet. You know,
why are we holding our feet?
Do you know when like you hear things wrong and you sing them and you let your kids sing them? Do you remember Don't Stop Believing? My kids, when they were little, one of them might have been Miles. They thought it was hold on to your feet. I thought it was hold on to your feet. Instead of like, I don't know why. Hold on to that feeling. So that's funny that you just said that. Hold on to your seat or your feet.
Hold on to your seat. Buckle up. All right. So we had a different song planned. We were going to do Boys Don't Cry from The Cure for obvious reasons, but we both watched The Bear, and not one, I don't know, I feel like it was in season 1. One of the final songs was Check It Out by John Mellencamp, and immediately Darren and I went and then watched the video like 5 more times because we forgot how much we love this song. And I was listening to it this morning as I was working out, and I was like, you know what? This is the song for Gen X men. So I'm just going to quote a bit of it, but it is such a good song. So go listen to all of it. It will be on the playlist. So Check It Out by John Mellencamp. Going to work on Monday, got yourself a family, all utility bills have been paid, and you can't tell your best buddy that you love him. So where does our time go? Got a brand new house in escrow, sleeping with your back to your loved one. That's all we've learned about happiness. Forgot to say hello to my neighbors. Sometimes I question my own behavior. Talking about the girls we've seen on the slides just to tell our souls we're still young lions. getting too drunk on Saturdays, playing football with the kids on Sundays, soaring with eagles all week long. And that's all we've learned about living. This is all we've learned about living. Just gave me the chills. I'm also having a hot flash. So I am sweating and have the chills at exactly the same time.
Very Gen X of you. That was so good.
It is so
We
good.
really do have the best music. All right, so that's it. But this will be an ongoing discussion because we're here to notice and disrupt and make room for our kids to go beyond where we are, right? And just women after us. So we will do it, and we will enjoy the shit out of life with these adorable Gen X men.
Yes, our generation, I know this sounds old, but I do believe our generation has the best music. I do love that Gen Z listens to our music because they have the access to it in a way we didn't back then. And I really do look forward to these amazing men feeling seen and heard. So this would once again be an awesome episode for you to share with your husbands, with your brothers, with your cousins, whoever you think it might land for, because they deserve to be seen and celebrated as well.
Absolutely. And as always, please let us know what you think and what your take is. And even if you don't agree, we'd love to hear it. You can always email us at thethingsweknowpodcast23@gmail.com.
Yep.
And we both will read it and we will reply.
Yep. That sounds good. Well, thanks everyone, as always, for listening, and we'll be back next week.